Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we are delighted to remind you that the book, The Codist, is back out, second edition released. The most diabolical plot you can imagine, the weaponization of DNA, Satan taking and finding the Levitical line that if you wipe out the Levites, the Sanhedrin cannot be led and cannot call for the return of Jesus. The most diabolical plot, and yet it actually exists. This is a story that's told to you in a fictional work, but it is based in fact that they are trying to weaponize DNA even today. And there's a lot of history behind this and research behind this. You can get it both in Kindle and in paperback at Amazon.com. And don't forget to visit ignitinganation.com. Scroll down to the bottom of the page, put in your email address, and get the first chapter of my new book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. I take you on a journey of God using things of the natural to reveal supernatural truths. Don't miss out on this great teaching. I'm very thrilled to have the opportunity to meet today with Dr. J. Brian Tucker, who is a co-author of a book called Altogether Different, Upholding the Church's Unity While Honoring Our Individual Identities. Dr. Brian Tucker is a Bachelor of Science, Lee College, Master of at Liberty University, doctor in ministry from Michigan Theological Seminary, a PhD from the University of Wales. He's a professor of New Testament at Moody Theological Seminary and honorary research fellow at the University of Wales, Trinity St. David in the United Kingdom. He is author of Reading 1 Corinthians, Remaining in Your Calling, Paul and the Continuation of Social Identities in 1 Corinthians, and You Belong to Christ, Paul and the Formation of Social Identity in 1 Corinthians 1 through 4. He is also the co-editor of the T&T Clark Handbook to Social Identity in the New Testament and Reading Paul in Context, Explorations in Identity Formation. In his spare time, he enjoys science fiction and playing and listening to jazz. We share that in common. I am a jazz lover. Miles Davis, Thelonious Monk, John Coltrane take me back to a place where I belong. Brian Tucker, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Brian, you have a background which is very steeped in addressing Paul's letters to Corinth about the struggles of their identity. This is something that is not often perceived because, first of all, there was no New Testament at the time of Jesus. So the first Jewish religious leader to come along who grabbed a hold of first century Judaism and the Messiah was Rabbi Shaul, the chief rabbi of Turkey. Put him back into his context of who he was and what he came through. A zealot against the teachings and the existence of Moshiach being on earth, and you calling him God, blasphemy. Okay, God is not a man that he should lie. Citing all of the Pharisaical teachings that, by the way, Jesus sat under those same Pharisaical teachings. Jesus believed in the law, the prophets, and the resurrection himself. Therefore, that put him in the Pharisaical category. Normally, I would use this first segment as a kind of a getting to know you and do the little background dance and how did you get called to all this. But I'm so fascinated with the fact that you have honed in on the struggle in identity of allowing Jesus to remain Jewish for allowing me to remain Jewish and be a believer in Jesus for the past 22 years and still live a Jewish lifestyle, and that I did not convert to anything because there's nothing for me to convert to. In fact, if anybody should convert, it would be the Gentiles if they wanted to believe in the Jewish Messiah. But Paul's message is, hey, oh, guys, let me get your attention. Conversion, not required. You don't have to convert. You don't have to stop being you. As a matter of fact, whoever you were when you came to Messiah, stay you, be you, live you. And we've become so convoluted, and we forget that there's only two people in the Bible, two people groups. There's Jews and Gentiles. That's all there is. You can break it down, but that's all there is Jews and Gentiles. And you can't become a Jew, and I can't become a Gentile, but in Ephesians 2, you and I can come together as one in Messiah in unity. We can become yachad, we can become one in common unity in our faith in the same promised Jewish Messiah. I've got to say this because it's almost explodes my brain that a seminarian, where honestly the indoctrination is all things gospel, all things Jesus, all things Christian, and here you come along and say, hold on a second, let's uphold the church's identity while honoring our individual identities, meaning I can honor my Jewish belief and my Jewish lifestyle. You can honor whether or not you believe in immersion or sprinkling or splashing, or for that matter, baptism by the hokey pokey. You put your left foot in, you take your left foot out, and everybody goes to heaven dry. How we've gotten so convoluted in establishing rules and regulations that we were already given the guidelines for life. How do we come up with books of discipline? And how do we come up with 38,000 denominations of Christianity? And who gave you the shot that that inoculated you to have you be such a sound, reasonable voice? I've been looking for you for 22 years.
Well, I was in a seminary class, and we had read a book, and we were discussing it, and I asked my professor, I said, I'm concerned about something that I see here, and the author said, what we need to do is we need to separate people from their religious experience. And I said, this really doesn't seem like that's, first of all, possible, and it definitely doesn't seem like a good idea. And my professor said, you know what, that's interesting. Maybe you could look at that sometime in the future. And so that always stuck with me. And I'd been in, when you're in marginalized religious groups, you feel the weight of orthodoxy. You feel the weight of kind of the movement of what's the accepted view. And you're always wondering, is my reading right? And so I was attracted to marginal readings and the pressure that power groups really impose on those that have minority readings. So when you come to 1 Corinthians, the standard approach is Paul's trying to get rid of everything, and it's just the gospel, like you said, it's just Jesus. But what ends up happening is what gets replaced is majority culture. And in the first century Roman context, there's nothing good coming from that, and so that was part of it, and then I also saw Paul seems to maintain, for example, as you mentioned, the distinction between Jew and non-Jew throughout his arguments, and he has directions that he gives that are gender-based, and so he continues gender identities, and he has some really interesting guidance with regard to slaves and masters that just raised a lot of concerns for me in terms of the ethics of interpretation. And so that sent me into 1 Corinthians, because that seems to be the place where a lot of these issues are hotly contested.
Well, you couldn't hit on a sweeter subject to me, because I'm so confused. when I came to faith in Messiah, first of all, I didn't come to faith in a church because I didn't understand a word that came out of their mouth. It seems like almost every day I bring up this sign, this billboard that says Jesus saves.
Yeah.
And as a Jew, I've always said, most unmotivational thing that I've ever seen. If you wanted to get my attention, you'd put Jesus in vests, and then you'd put a phone number. You know what? I might call that phone number, but Jesus saves, I'm literal. Hebrew minds are literal. We're clear meaning people. We're fine with the tetragram. We're fine with not trying to give God a name. We're fine accepting the unexplainable. We're perfectly fine in that. We're opinionated, as there are all the Talmudic scholars. All became Talmudic scholars because they all disagreed with each other. The commentators, and I actually call them two words, common taters. They're just ordinary potatoes to me. They're just man's opinion. Paul talks in terms still in Jewish vernacular, in idiomatic language of Paleo-Greek, not Roman Greco, a different language, the King James kind of language. He's still in the linguistic, idiomatic word pictures of Jewish thought. And he never stops that. And God doesn't stop it. John at Patmos, every imagery he was given was Jewish imagery because he was talking to a Jew. He wasn't talking to a Gentile, and he wasn't talking to, and this idea, and I want to make this very clear, the word Gentile only means non-Jewish. This negative association of me calling somebody a Gentile just means you're not Jewish. It doesn't mean you're a pagan. My people were probably the hardiest pagans of paganry throughout biblical history. We were just as bad as the people that were offering their babies and paying homage to Pan. We had every attachment to every Sodom and Gomorrah were Jewish cities. Let's get real about the reality of, we're talking about a people set apart that didn't do what they were supposed to do, so we took a hit for it. And we're only 14 million people. There's only 14 million of us in the whole world, but yet we're the people of the book and the land of the book. So God had a promise, and it wasn't conditional upon our performance because we're miserably falling short. It says, none are righteous, no, not none. But what you've done is, and I want to give you a high compliment, you have embraced a Pauline style that advances a Pauline, I don't want to call it an ideology or a theology, but it's a Pauline approach to the Christian, not even the Christian life, because it's not. It's a Pauline approach to the believer's expression. And I hosted an event here in Birmingham, a Passover Seder, and about 1,500 people came to it, representing over 100 churches. And it was the first time an ecumenical gathering of anything of its kind ever occurred in a city where there's over 2,500 churches for a population of 1 million people. And the collar-wearing priest and the Sikh and the daishiki-wearing AME and the go all the way through the gamut, the collar wearing evangelical Lutheran, all the way through, and when we ask for all the pastors to stand up so we could acknowledge, literally tears began to roll down people's faces when they realized this is the body of Christ and these people have never met each other. And they're across the street from each other and they don't know each other. They're not part of a common emergency response plan. They're not a safe haven. They're not a community. They're different and they're vying for your tithe. It's like used car lots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you address in altogether different a way in which we can be one, but maintain our unique identity.
Yeah.
How does someone do that?
Yeah. So I think that's exactly the problem that Paul needed to address, and so the structure of his thought, in some ways, or the lens, if we were to think of it that way, is in 1 Corinthians 7:17 to 24. And what I found interpreters saying, see, when you go to 1 Corinthians 7:17 to 24, Paul says circumcision is nothing, uncircumcision is nothing, and so basically it's indifferent to him, and he doesn't care about this anymore. But when you read the text, it's actually the opposite, and he's actually saying, if you're circumcised, don't seek to undo your circumcision, so that there is a calling for a circumcised life and a calling for an uncircumcised life. So that got me thinking a bit about, well, then maybe there's different social implications that flow from the gospel. And so if you take the example that you just mentioned, in the book there's a reference to a story from a book called Saving the Gospel from the Cowboys. And it describes a Native American who came to Christ, and he asked his pastor, well, what do I do? I don't really have a model, a prototype for which to follow Christ. He said, well, just put all of that stuff away and, just be like us. And it created a lot of difficulty for him. And I think that Christian theology, from its core, gets Jewish identity wrong. We get into the 2nd century. And so what ends up happening is that gets baked into late antiquity and on into the Reformation, where they're still getting Jewish identity wrong. So what ends up happening is that you get Jewish identity wrong. Well, it shouldn't surprise us that we're going to get non-Jewish identities wrong. And so we don't go to the scriptures for embodiment. We just go to the scriptures so I can get saved and go to heaven. And so it sent me back to kind of thinking, all right, maybe there's actually guidance there for us. And then we see this in 1 Corinthians 9, where Paul's using a different approach to mission to Jews than he does for non-Jews. But in that different approach, he doesn't stop being Jewish. I still think he maintains probably something like a messianic halakha. He continues to live an observant life, and so, but his approach to table fellowship is much more inclusive, similar to Jesus. And so that kind of flagged for me that, wow, there's maybe parts of my life as an American that needs to be transformed. And then there's areas that can continue and be used for mission as social identification. So that transformation really fits into 4, and I think they really go across any identity. If there's immorality, idolatry, unscriptural thought patterns, or cultural boasting, then Paul seems to have a problem with it.
Yes.
But if it doesn't fit in those categories, he says, I'm going to give you this back, and so that you can do whatever you do then for God's glory, 1 Corinthians 10. And so he opens up diverse patterns of life. And so I'm not saying to those in my church that are thinking differently about a social or political issue that you and I can't worship together. And there's asking for this kind of uniformity that really all it ends up doing is kind of squashing down the difference. And so they're not really changing. They're just trying to play nice. And so that doesn't produce biblical unity. That just produces cultural uniformity, which is not an implication of the gospel.
What's so interesting, Paul embraced this thought, you embraced this thought, and I'll explain the view and the vision. When Paul says, now there is no Greek or Jew, There is no male or female. There was Jesus standing in the pulpit in the Second Temple, looking out. And here's what he saw. He saw men on the lower level, and he saw women in the balconies. He saw in the courtyard outside the doors, outside the gate, he saw the court of the Gentiles. Okay? So there was male, female, Jew, Gentile. There were walls of partition dividing these. Now he's not saying there's not men or women. He's not saying there's not Jews or Gentiles. He's saying we now can become one. We can worship together as one. If I want to chant the Shema, okay, as Paul, what did he do? There's a pattern. Every time he traveled to a city, he went to the synagogue first, as was his custom. Repeated over again, as was his custom. Meaning that if you're an African American, you're black, you become a Christian, do you stop being black? You're Italian. When you become a Christian, do you stop being an Italian? We've taken this and we've said, oh, no, everything gets erased. There's only one identity, and you have to conform to this image of Jesus. Okay, I'm with you there. I'm absolutely with you there. I have to be conformed to the image of God. We agree on that. So you tell me what God looks like. God's tall, he's short, he's black, he's white, he's male, he's female, he has a big nose, he has a small nose. He has long hair, he has short hair. He's 6'10", he's 5'3", he's 4'2", he's a baby, he's an old man, he's 986 years old. He's all those things. And so what does Paul say? I want to be all things to all people. Why? Because who God made you, he made you as an individual, conformed to the image of himself that he wants reflected in you. And so, uniformity in agreement that Jesus is the Messiah is the beginning and the end. Everything else is personal. When you think about that, you and I absolutely agree that Jesus was the Messiah. He died for our sins. He rose on the third day. He's sitting at the right hand of the Father, interceding for us. And because he lives, I'm forgiven and I get eternal life. Now, if I decide that I want to go dance tonight, and you don't believe in dancing, well, then you're probably not going to go out dancing with me when I go with my friends to go dancing. Okay? Does that make you less of a Christian? Does it make me less of a Christian because I like to dance? Okay? We have added this judgmental factor, and then we introduce denominational Christianity, and what we don't get, and you get, and I really want to address this, is the fouling of the water by Constantine in 325 AD, when he changed the Sabbath from Friday night, Saturday to Sunday, when he changed Passover to Easter, and when he introduced the doctrine of the Trinity, was a direct shot at Deuteronomy 6:4. And it's not taught and it's not understood. It's understood from the Jewish side because I was called a Christ killer until 1972 when the Catholic Church said we no longer blame the Jews for killing Jesus.
So I think you're right. I think that institutional kind of watershed moment at Constantine produces something that was probably moving along the ways, and so some scholars want to call this a parting of the ways. It really set it up to where it was almost illegal in that sense to have this, what we would describe today, kind of a salient in Christ Jewish identity.
Yes.
And so no wonder it disappears for the majority of church history and then reappears in the last couple hundred years, there was, again, there wasn't an institutional context for it. Those institutional structures just weighed heavy on any kind of diversity. But when you think about what was happening, these communities were bifurcating and kind of separating themselves out, and so they're only around people like themselves, and so their assumption is, well, there's no Jews around us, so we must be their replacement at that point, and so if you think about the first heresy that the church addresses in the 2nd century is Gnosticism, it's really a separating out of the embodiment from the spiritual identity. And so because there's a rush to just saying, well, we all have the same spiritual identity, that should be fine, what ends up happening is that we don't actually address the hard issues of how we live together. I mean, if you think about the issues, and obviously you can speak to this more precisely than me, but even within Messianic Judaism, contemporary Messianic Judaism, you have a lot of diverse views. You have the one law movement that comes into play, and then you have those that seem to want to draw from rabbinic halakha to help embody, and others say, you know what, that doesn't seem to fit, and so we're going to pull from apostolic teachings, and so there's these interesting debates, but there's a something that keeps them together. And what ends up happening when we move into evangelical church settings is they lose that which keeps them together. They forget the fact that their identity as a member of the body of Messiah is crucial. It's more important than who they are individually. And so then they just, well, my own personal identity program is all that I'm going to worry about, and then they just kind of divert based on politics or race or those kind of things. And so what the book's trying to do is basically say the approach that ignores all of those indexes of identity is doomed to failure, because it's going to reproduce majority culture, which is highly likely against the gospel at its core.
I'm actually looking at the clock, and I'd hate to do this, but we have to go to break. But we're talking with Dr. J. Brian Tucker, co-author of the book Altogether Different, Upholding the Church's Unity While Honoring Our Individual Identities. A passionate topic for me as a Jew. A passionate topic for me as a Jewish believer into what my identity, can I remain under the context of the Bible, not under the context of man's definition of denominational affiliation or legalistic practices. I am a self-described Pentecostal, charismatic, spirit-filled Jew, so that I can encompass all that God has for me, and that every promise that He's made in the Scriptures from Genesis to Revelation apply to me as a follower of Christ, as they do apply to you, regardless of what somebody is telling you. God may be telling you something completely different, and you have to make that choice. And when you come to that crossroads, this is the kind of book you need to read to understand that when you come to those crossroads, Jeremiah even says it very clearly. Choose the ancient path. That's where you're going to find your peace. The ancient path is to find your identity is defined by God, not by man. And when you allow man to shape your identity, you're conforming yourself to the image of man, not the image of God. It's the difference between PC and GC. Are you going to be politically correct or God correct? And I choose God correct. And this is a pathway to doing it. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to dig into more about Altogether Different. Dr. J. Brian Tucker, how to uphold the church's unity while honoring our individual identities. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Back. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking to Dr. J. Brian Tucker, co-author of the book Altogether Different, Upholding the Church's Unity While Honoring Our Individual Identities. Brian, welcome back to the program.
I'm glad to be here.
We are having a dynamic, outstanding discussion about the foundation of Pauline theology, life and identity in Messiah, of I don't have to stop being me to believe in Jesus. I have to start being more like him, but I can still wear my daishiki. I can still wear my kippah. I can still wear my talit. I can still wear my tzitzit. I can still wear my crucifix. I can still wear my collar. I can dress in black. I can dress in shorts. I don't have requirements. That is legalism. And in the death of Messiah, we were set free from the curse of the law, but the wisdom of the law has never disappeared, and the wisdom of the law will never disappear. And the law, 613 Old Testament commands, guess how many are in the New Testament? 1,250. 1,250 commands of the New Testament. Love your neighbor as yourself is a command. Bless those who curse you is a command. Esteem the other more than yourself. These are all framed idiomatically and linguistically as commands. These are not optional. Okay? Forgive your neighbor, or you won't be forgiven. That is a command. And we've taken it so far out of context of understanding that God started out with the Edenic covenant. It was an if-then scenario beginning in the garden. Okay? As long as you do everything I tell you, we're in good shape. But if you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, then consequence will befall you, and we're introduced to death. And that pattern is all throughout the Bible. We serve a compound unity or triune God who gives us 66 books. I consider it one book, but the world calls it 66 books of dualities. Light and dark, good and evil, heaven and hell, right and wrong. Go on down the list. There's always the choices. The A or B, A or B, A or B, A or B, A or B. If, then, if, then, if, then. If you do it this way, there's a blessing. If you do it this way, it's a curse. He gave it to us that way on Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. And I say those words to most churchgoers, and they go, where's Mount Ebal and where's Mount Gerizim? Well, that's, in essence, that's where the origin of the Sermon on the Mount came from. That's the foundation. Blessed is the one. Jesus just decides, I'm going to focus on the blessings. All right? God already took care of giving the message of the curses. I'm going to tell you about all the blessings. And we've missed it. So how do we get back on track? How do we remove, and is it at the seminary level? Is it at the congregant level? Is it at the pastoral level? How do we take Christianity back to being freeing our personal growth in Messiah, because we're to all be individual reflections of the Messiah? Mm-hmm. Where do we start?
Yeah, I mean, that's in some ways is John Kessler and I, as we talked about this book and the formulating of it, he was coming at this from the perspective of most ministry leaders don't recognize the power that culture plays in their local gatherings. And so if we don't think theologically about the culture, then its negative influences just run roughshod over our relationships within the believing community. So one part of it is to recognize that that's there. And so, but that doesn't push us to retreat. So for example, in 1 Corinthians 5, it seems like the Corinthians misunderstood Paul's view on separation, because they seemed to think that they were supposed to remove themselves from the immoral. And he's like, no, it's the immoral within the congregation that were the problem. You have to go out of the world to be able to get. So one part of this is to recognize that we're called to go out into a culture that is not going to be friendly to what we have to say. So that's where the kind of living as an outsider, the last part of the book comes into play. But the crucial thing is when we go out into that culture, if there are no connecting points to that culture, then our message is not understandable. And so what we see later on in 1 Corinthians, and it gets in a section in 1 Corinthians 8 to 10 when he's really wrestling with these different ways that there are different implications based on situations that you find yourself in. And then he describes, okay, your behavior, you need to watch your behavior even with outsiders. Be concerned about how outsiders might view what you're doing. And so that sent me to thinking a bit about mission as social identification. So that the mission that we're called to is to identify with the ethnic groups, the cultural groups that we find ourselves in, not to engage socially in the same behaviors. In other words, there's a difference in integration and identification. I can identify, but I'm not going to engage in those exact same behaviors because, as you mentioned, there are a lot of commands. I mean, we talked about 1 Corinthians 7 and 1 Corinthians 9 when he says what that boils down to is following the commands. They're there, and then he picks up on this and calls this the law of Christ. And so oftentimes because of the specter of nomism or legalism that people are afraid of, they just say it doesn't matter. So then we have congregations full of undiscipled Messiah followers. And so there's getting a sense of the identities that we have in Christ. They are for mission purposes. They are not for my own kind of enjoyment. They should be outward focused and not inward focused. And so that's in some ways the book is really designed to kind of hit on the different aspects of that issue, address what it means for personal identity, what it means for social identity, what it means for me to be a member of the body of Christ, and then it applies that to issues of ethnicity, which we've been hitting on, issues of sexual identity, and age issues, and then kind of offers some principles to move us forward. The downside is those principles are very messy, and as you were alluding to earlier, the different ways that Jewish interpreters would debate over the implications of those texts. In some ways, we miss the joy of that kind of interaction because we just say, well, just tell me what I should do. Well, that really doesn't solve it because there are unique and different and diverse patterns of life that I think emerge from the one gospel.
This comes up so often in my conversations. You know, there's no Hebrew word for brain. Most people don't know that, but brain isn't in the Bible. Okay, there's some references to mind, but there's not a Hebrew word for mind because thinking is done in the heart. It's established all over the Bible. So a man thinks in his heart, so he does. Jesus says you wash the outside of the cup, it's the inside, it's out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. And so these are matters of the heart. Now, people should be entitled to congregate with like-minded people. That's what denominational Christianity became. I can tell you about my ignorance. I got a call two different times. One was, did I want to do a special on the 500th anniversary of the Reformation? And I said, I'd love to, but what was it? And they said, what do you mean, what was it? I said, well, what was it? And they said, well, that was when the Protestant church was born. They broke away from the Catholic Church. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm completely unfamiliar with any of that. I'm the wrong host to do that show. Then I got a call to, they had found some lost preachings of Charles Spurgeon. And they called me and they said, and it's local because it's Samford University, and they said, we want to release this and we'd like to do it on your program. I said, I'd love to. but can you tell me something about him? And they said, well, he was the greatest preacher in England and all this stuff. And said, but you're going to have to kind of give me an education because I don't know anything about the guy.
Yeah.
And they said, well, wait a second, aren't you an ordained Baptist? I am, but I got that. The way I got it was different than because I was already an ordained rabbi. So there was a whole process that was a whole lot of grace was afforded me. Mm-hmm. And I don't preach any of man's theology whatsoever. So people say, am I a Calvinist? I say, no, I'm a Levi. Calvins are too small. And because I stay out of the world, I'm a biblicist. I'm just a guy that reads the Bible, studies the Bible, and preaches the Bible. Okay? Mm-hmm. All that other stuff is great, but I grew up in the extra biblical world. If you grow up in the Talmudic world, okay, you reach a point. I reached a point at age 40 where I had enough of man. I was so sick and tired of hearing what the rabbi had to say. I just wanted to know what God had to say. And once I read what God had to say, I no longer cared about what any man had to say because I finally knew the truth. So your premise is that we are all one in Messiah, Ephesians 2. From the two he shall make one new man, one in Messiah. Romans 9, 10, and 11, the engrafting of the Gentile into the commonwealth of Israel. The branch doesn't support the root supports the branch. The church is the body of Christ. Mm-hmm. That then brings up the question, if the church is the body, does the body marry itself? Because everybody tells me the church is the bride. Well, Paul says the church is the body. So then I get really confused because I thought God betrothed himself to Israel and he was coming back to redeem Israel so that Jesus could rule and reign for 1,000 years and then God could bring down the final fulfillment of Genesis 3:15, could finally come into play, and there would be a new heaven and a new earth, and all that was the redemption of the Genesis 15 covenant, the covenant with Israel. I betrothed myself to you. Jeremiah 33, I was a husband to you. Now all of a sudden we get in the concept of, God divorced Israel, and now he's marrying the church at the wedding supper. And I'm going, you're hurting my head. You're really hurting my head, because God said, if you continue down this path, I'll treat you like an unfaithful wife. Mm-hmm. All right? But there was a repentance that took place. There was no divorce ceremony. There was no decree issued. And so as I began to hear about the theologies, I began to realize that the Bible was not being preached the way the Bible was written. The Bible is being preached for the convenience or for the agenda of a particular denomination, or in many cases of a particular man. And Paul warned that this was going to happen. Many times in his letters to Timothy, he warned. I think homosexuality is the definition of lover of self. That's just a personal reflection. People say it's pride. Pride's been called pride. There's no reason to call pride something else. Pride has its own word. It's been used uniformly throughout the Bible. Lover of self means I look in the mirror and I love that image and I'm attracted to it. And that to me is that male to male, that sexual same-sex attraction. Just a personal opinion as I look at the scriptures. How do we come together? How do we set aside these? I want to call them doctrinal dictators and theological terrorists. It's become so heavy-handed that people are now telling you there's a right way and a wrong way to be a Christian.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's when we were working on this book, we had both been pastors and been leaders in congregations, and we saw the messes that were associated with conflict. So that every time there was a conflict in church, it almost never was positively resolved, and oftentimes it produced other congregations, and then that you get a re-entrenchment of the leadership, and so now that leader is hardened, and so the next time somebody might have a wise thing to say or something that is actually biblical, they're reading that through their past conflict, and then they harden, and then you end up with these cycles of spiritual abuse. People then kind of associate that religious hierarchy with their relationship with God, and then the cycle just continues. And so part of this was to help them to recognize that we need to embrace the mess that is in the communities instead of running away from it, because ignoring it is not going to make it any better. And that's what that's kind of the first principle that we laid out. And then this really drove us to this idea of pistis, or faithfulness, or trustworthiness, to really say this isn't simply just cognitive, because if I just get the right thinking about it, that really doesn't fix it, because we have, like you said, we have a whole history of interpretation of these certain ecclesial structures that all they do is just reinforce existing ecclesial structures that haven't produced human flourishing. So we have to allow this idea of who we are in Christ to change the way that we embody life in Messiah. And then because our culture is so messed up on this issue, we have to shift and say, first, it has to be what God says about who I really am. So it doesn't mean that all the other parts of my life those go away. It means that now they're given back to me in the power of the gospel. And then we just recognize there's a us and there's a them, and this is going to always be there. And so I need to recognize my tendency then in those us and them moments is to judge other people and to kind of believe stereotypes, and to say, you know what, I got to recognize that's there. And just like Paul does in 1 Corinthians 4, Paul's like, I don't even trust my own self-categorization. I can't even examine myself because I'm likely to make myself out better than I really am. And so I always go, well, if Paul was that way, then I really need to be careful on these us and them moments, because I'm most likely going to make myself look better and the out-group member not so good. So those are some of the principles that we tried to incorporate into the book. To recognize it's a mess, that faith can transform our identity. God tells us who we are. This us and them is going to be there, but then ultimately it's not about me, but it's about who I am in Messiah that should be driving the way that we interact with each other.
But I will tell you and summate this way. There is trouble coming. Jesus says, if you follow me, there'll be tribulation. Whether you think you're going to be taken out before it happens, while it happens, after it happens, it doesn't matter. There's trouble coming. And if we don't find a way to put unity back into community, this common unity of Messiah, and start being a sanctuary and a refuge for both the lost and the found, we are going to be a house divided against ourselves, and we will fall. And we've been warned by Paul, we've been warned by God that this is not the way it's to be, is that the strength and the power of the unity of the light, not that when I'm in the world, I'm the light of the world, now you're the light of the world. We're to be one light, and it's supposed to be billions of candle power strong, not 1 billion or 2 billion individual candles. And that we've got to find this, otherwise we will be defeated. And we're told that there is going to be half that are going to take the mark, and half are going to lose their salvation, and half because they're deceived. This is part of the deception, and this division is a tool of the enemy to divide us, and we need to understand it, and we need to stop playing church, and we need to start being the reflection of Messiah in our own identity, but one, unified, standing together, linked arm in arm in an army that cannot be beaten.
Yep.
Brian, thank you. Just from the bottom of my heart, thank you for addressing a topic that needs to be addressed. And if you are struggling with your identity and you're wondering whether or not you're a Christian and you're required to observe the Sabbath, the answer is no. You're not required. Will you find personal enjoyment? You just might. It's available to you. Just like everything within the Scriptures is available to you. Not required. Your salvation will not come from obedience to the law, but the pages didn't go blank. So dietary, right? Should you eat pork? If you ask your doctor, he'll tell you no. Okay? He's not your rabbi and he's not your pastor. He's going to tell you that it's just not good food. All the things are the things that are making us the people that are sick. But are you free? Paul says all things are lawful, but not all things are beneficial. And that's where you come in with your individual choices of deciding for yourself what's beneficial for you as a believer and how you can be more transformed and conformed to the image of Messiah. Brian Tucker, altogether different, upholding the church's unity while honoring our individual identities. Thank you so much for being with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Thanks.
God bless you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.